Okay, picture this. It's the dead of night in ancient Rome. You're suddenly jolted awake, but not by an alarm. It's the choking, heavy smell of soot and the absolute terror of your neighbors screaming. You rush to the door, but those steep, narrow wooden stairs outside are already engulfed in flames. For the ordinary Roman citizen, this kind of visceral terror, which was captured just so vividly by the ancient satirist Juvenal, well, it wasn't some rare nightmare. It was a very real, looming, everyday probability. Welcome to the true Roman experience.
In this explainer, we are going to completely strip away those romanticized myths of sprawling marble palaces. Instead, we're diving right into the dirt and the noise to reconstruct an entire human world through the experiences of the working classes. We're going to uncover exactly how the vast majority of ordinary citizens in the capital of the ancient world actually lived, survived, and ultimately built the very foundation of urban living as we know it today.
Section 1. The Myth of Marble Rome, Beyond the Palaces.
To truly understand this civilization, we have to look past the emperors and confront some staggering realities. Rome was this hyper-urbanized metropolis, right? At its peak, it was home to up to 1 million people. And that sheer overwhelming density required an architectural revolution. Enter the Insula. Literally translating to island, these towering brick, concrete, and timber apartment structures rose like literal islands amidst the twisting, incredibly crowded streets of the city. Just to put that into perspective, by the 4th century, municipal records show there were over 46,000 insulae in Rome. Compare that to just under 1,800 private mansions. It's a massive difference.
So you have this really stark physical divide in Roman society. If you were in the 0.1%, you lived in a domus. That meant sprawling, horizontal estates built around these serene, private courtyards. Beautiful, right? But for literally everyone else, the only way to go was up. The working classes, the artisans, the shopkeepers, the newly arrived migrants, they were all packed tightly together, stacked toward the sky in high-density commercial real estate developments.
Section 2. The vertical stratification of wealth, climbing to poverty.
Now, modern city living has trained us to think the penthouse is the ultimate luxury, right? Well, actually, scratch that. The ancient world operated on an entirely different set of rules. The Roman Insula completely penalized verticality. Basically, socioeconomic inequality was perfectly mapped to physical elevation. The lower you lived, the safer and more luxurious your life was. The piano nobile on the lower floors, that's where you'd find gorgeous mosaics and frescoes for wealthy families. But man, as you climbed those dark, terrifyingly narrow wooden stairs, the ceilings dropped, the light faded out, and the rooms just shrank. By the time you reached the cubiculum up in the attic, you were probably a day laborer freezing in a single room of bare masonry, literally sharing your living space with nesting pigeons.
And we can actually see this brutal economic engine at work in the archaeological record. Take the well-preserved ground-floor medianum apartments from the port city of Ostia, for example. These lower levels absolutely were not slums. They were incredibly spacious, highly planned investments. They were deliberately designed around central halls with multiple rooms to attract very wealthy tenants. This setup generated a massive, steady stream of rental income for elite landlords. Landlords who, of course, never actually set foot in the buildings themselves.
But here is where everyday life gets really tough. The absolute lack of plumbing technology directly dictated human behavior. Without mechanical pumps, running water above the ground floor was just impossible. So if you lived on the 4th floor, you were physically hauling heavy, sloshing jugs of water up dozens of treacherous stairs every single day. And, because cooking over an open flame in a cramped timber-filled apartment was essentially a death wish, an entire ecosystem of street-level commerce popped up. People had to buy their daily meals from places called thermopolia, which were, for all intents and purposes, the ancient Roman equivalent of a fast food stand.
Section 3. A symphony of urban noise. No escape from the street.
Hauling water was honestly just the start of the physical toll. Because to inhabit an insula meant subjecting yourself to a literally inescapable sensory assault. Glass was an immense luxury back then, so most apartment windows were just open holes in the brickwork. You had a terrible choice to make: close your wooden shutters and sit in pitch blackness, or open them up and invite in the freezing winds, the absolute stench of the streets, and the constant, deafening roar of 1 million people. Oh, and to stay warm, residents had to burn charcoal braziers indoors, which meant these poorly ventilated little rooms constantly filled with soot and highly toxic carbon monoxide.
If you're wondering exactly what this sounded like, we actually have this agonizing, but honestly kind of hilarious, eyewitness account from the philosopher Seneca. The poor guy rented a room directly above a public bathhouse. He wrote all about this torturous noise.
The heavy grunting of weightlifters, the rhythmic slapping sounds from a masseuse, and get this, the piercing, shrill cries of the local armpit hair plucker advertising his services, quickly followed by the agonizing yells of his unfortunate clients. In an insula, you shared your entire life with everyone. Privacy? It just simply did not exist.
Section 4. Fire, Collapse, and Precarity, the Daily Terror. Because beyond the freezing cold and the noise, there was a far more lethal threat hanging directly over the heads of the urban poor. 70 feet. That was the strict emergency height limit eventually enforced by Emperor Augustus. And why did they need a height limit? Because speculative real estate developers were wildly throwing up insulae that were 8, sometimes 9 stories high. They used dirt-cheap, improperly baked bricks and faulty mortar that practically turned to sludge the second it rained. These towering, incredibly top-heavy structures were absolutely notorious for just collapsing directly into the street, crushing everyone inside.
And the darkest part? The elite actively, intentionally profited from this suffering. Take Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was allegedly the wealthiest man in Roman history, and this guy was essentially the ultimate slumlord. When an insula caught fire, which was super frequent, considering all the oil lamps and timber, Crassus would show up with his own private fire brigade of enslaved architects and builders. But here's the catch. He would literally refuse to put out the fire until the panicked, desperate owner sold him the burning building for a fraction of what it was worth. Once he owned it, he'd extinguish the flames, rebuild it as cheaply as possible, and rent it right back out. The terror and precarity of the masses was quite literally the fuel for elite wealth.
This structural precarity was so deep, it created this universal, grinding psychological anxiety for everyone except the absolute poorest. The satirical poet Catullus once wrote to a beggar named Furius, praising him, telling him he was actually incredibly lucky because he had nothing to lose. He didn't have to constantly fear a sudden fire, a catastrophic building collapse, or getting robbed blind in the middle of the night. If you rented an apartment in Rome, you went to sleep every single night knowing you could wake up entirely destitute, or maybe not wake up at all.
Section 5. The Legacy of High Density, the First Modern City.
Yet, despite all of that, the smoke, the constant fear, the extortionate rent, the insula represented a monumental leap in human engineering and social organization. It genuinely laid the exact blueprint for the cities we inhabit today. What the Romans managed to create out of pure, unadulterated necessity was the world's very first system of organic, mixed-use zoning. By putting commercial shops, the tabernae, on the ground floor and stacking residential units right on top, they inadvertently created these incredibly vibrant, walkable communities. You didn't have a long commute, your local baker, your launderer, your public bathhouse. They were all just part of your immediate shared everyday ecosystem.
And honestly, the most amazing part is that we can still see this legacy standing today. Now, while most of those flimsy Republican-era insulae burned to the ground centuries ago, the Insula the Aracoli is still there, right at the foot of the Capitolian Hill in Rome. It was rediscovered in the 20th century, hidden beneath a medieval church. Its 5 remaining stories of tough brick and concrete just gaze out over the modern city today. It stands as a really rare, enduring monument, not to the grand generals or the wealthy emperors, but to the everyday, ordinary Roman citizen who just tried to survive.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to take a look around at our modern world. Sure, we have fast elevators and double-pane glass windows now, but we are still building our cities skyward. We still navigate constant urban noise, exorbitant rent prices, and really stark vertical inequality. Next time you find yourself looking up at a towering high-rise apartment building, I want you to ask yourself, across 2,000 years of human history, how much of our urban human condition has truly changed?